This starts like your typical modern romance with a horror movie twist. Boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl breaks it off with boy. Months later, boy vows to win her back or kill her trying. But before he can finish her off, something out of this world saves her. Did I mention this is also a ghost story? Let's start back in 2018 when Eilish Poe first met Jonathan Crosley. She's 21, he's a couple of years older. At first, they're just friends having fun together, bonding over their love of kids and teaching. When the summer ends, they go their separate ways. John takes off for a teaching job in Spain. He wants to be a history professor, and Eilish ends up teaching 3rd grade in Fort Collins, Colorado. Fast forward 2 years. It's the summer of 2020, the middle of the COVID pandemic. The world is on lockdown. John's teaching job in Spain is over, so he comes back to Colorado and gets in touch with Eilish. And before long, their friendship turns into something more. But she wants to keep it light. She's upfront with him about that from the beginning. And at first, he agrees. But as the summer goes on, he starts getting more and more intense. By the end of the summer, his constant declarations of love is just too much for her. So Eilish breaks it off, or tries to. John's just not having it. Now, this guy is a big film buff. Horror, romance, all of it. And he's acting like this is all a rom-com. Her doorbell rings and there he is clutching chocolates and flowers. He's calling and texting constantly, telling her he loves her and he's not going to give up on their relationship. He's scaring her. Then one day he stops. She thinks it's finally over, but she's wrong. Months later, on November 3rd, 2020, John is texting her again. He wants to get back together. She's floored. Why can't he just move on? The next day, Wednesday, November 4th, Eilish gets home from work around 5 p.m. She comes in, puts her things down, and notices the basement door is open. That's weird, but it's not alarming. It's not like her front door was open, so she closes it and doesn't give it a second thought. She's been teaching 8-year-olds all day. She's worn out. She changes into her cozy clothes, flamingo pajamas, her fuzzy pink slippers, but before she can put her feet up and relax, she has to clean her pet rabbit Boomer's cage. She's going downstairs to grab more litter box pellets when all of a sudden she hears a noise behind her. It's John, a man she hasn't seen in months, is somehow in her house. He tries to get her in a chokehold, but she fights back with everything she's got. While she's still trying to understand what's going on, he grabs the back of her long hair and shoves her head into the wall over and over. Then he pulls out a knife, a 4-inch long kitchen knife. Little did Eilish know that not only has John not moved on from their breakup, he's actually moved in. John has been in the house for 26 hours. The messages he's been sending her were coming from a crawl space in her house. He cut the screen and broke in through the small basement window with a gallon jug of water and a backpack loaded with a blanket, snacks, and entertainment. While Eilish and her roommate were sleeping, John was most likely walking around the house, maybe even watching Eilish sleep. When he had to hide in the crawl space, he watched YouTube clips from horror movies over and over. One of them was Parasite. Have you seen that one? It's about a South Korean family secretly living in their boss's basement before all hell breaks loose. John watched the gory stabbing scene on repeat. He also watched Kill Bill, the scene where she's slicing up people in the nightclub, and Midsummer. John kept replaying the part where the old person jumps off a cliff. He also brought a couple of horror books with him. He was waiting for this moment. Eilish lunges for the knife but ends up grabbing the blade. It slices her hand down to the bone. John still has it in his hand, stabbing her over and over. She's alone in the house with him. Her roommate is gone, so she screams for Alexa to call 911, but it's not working. She's only got one more option left: play dead. And just like that, she lets go. She lays on her back and lets him stab her one last time. The knife punctures her lung, causing this strange death rattle of a noise, which is very convincing when you're trying to play dead. In an interview with the Otherworld podcast, she said, "As quickly as he started, he just stopped. He stared at me, still on his knees. He left her there to die. She starts searching for her phone, but she can only move one arm and she can't find it. The world starts fading in and out. This is it. She's about to die." But what happens next defies all comprehension. Her grandmother suddenly appears 2 feet away from where Eilish is lying in a pool of blood. She's smiling at her comfortingly, except her grandmother died in 2014. When Grandma fades out, Vicky, her best friend from high school, takes her place, except Vicky killed herself in February 2020. The next person to appear is 24-year-old Alyssa Burkett. Alyssa is a murder victim from Eilish's hometown in Texas, and at that moment, they've got even more in common because Alyssa's ex stabbed her to death just 1 month earlier, and she's not smiling. She looks frantic. Her eyes are wild. Alyssa pushed the air with her hands. The next thing I know, she literally pushed me up, and I was sitting upright, and I hadn't been sitting upright on my own the entire time, is what Eilish told the Otherworld podcast. It saved her life. Her phone is in her pajama chest pocket. She can barely get it out. Then she's bleeding so much the phone can't sense her fingers. She's too weak to hold it, but luckily it falls face up and she remembers the emergency SOS feature. But Eilish has to use the tip of her nose to activate it. 7 minutes later, the police are there. She's saved. They rush Eilish to the hospital where she's treated for 16 stab wounds on her neck, chest, and arms. Meanwhile, the search is on for Jonathan Crossley. They trace his phone and see he's headed toward the mountains. His car turns up at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and police learn he rented a car a couple of days earlier. They trace his rental car to Lorry State Park near the trailhead for Arthur's Rock, a 150-foot cliff with views for miles and miles. And at the bottom of the cliff is Jonathan's body. But our story doesn't quite end there. Police backtracked through his phone records and uncovered more answers to explain why he did this. In the weeks leading up to the attack, there were signs he was spiraling. He was obsessed with the idea the COVID pandemic was to blame for Eilish breaking up with him. He was deep into online research about all the ways COVID affects relationships and how and why it causes couples to split up. He messaged friends and family about feeling isolated and trapped, and then he came up with his deadly plan. If you ask Eilish if it wasn't for those 3 ghosts, she would be dead. Since that day, she's been slowly trying to recover. She's had at least a dozen surgeries, but at least she's been able to get back into her classroom. Some people explain the spirits she saw as science, her brain's way of comforting her at the end. But she doesn't see it that way. In her words, it was as real as seeing an alive person in the room. It wasn't ghostly. But what do you think? Thanks for watching this recap. You can hear Eilish Poe's story in her own words on the Otherworld podcast hosted by Jack Wagner. We left the link in the pinned comment below. And that's your recap.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
If you like getting all the crime in half the time, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss a story.
We're here Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but don't go away. Catch up on more recaps right here, right now.
Until next time, take care.